Welcome to Andy Staples On3. I'm here at Big Ten Media Days talking about something that has nothing to do with the Big Ten, at least we think.
We think.
Pete Nakos from On3 joins me. Pete, it's been one of those days.
It sure has. Sure has.
This, I think, is the third opening segment I wound up recording for this show. And the reason we are doing another opening segment is there is potential realignment afoot. Pete Thamel from ESPN and then multiple folks have also corroborated that Colorado held a Board of Regents meeting on Wednesday. There's another one scheduled for Thursday. You can find it on their website.
Yep.
And presumably these are to plan a move to the Big 12.
Correct.
That's not what their chancellor said.
That is not
like
what the
6
chancellor
days
said.
ago.
No. But George Kliavkoff's prediction came true, right? Deion Sanders and the TV contract.
I was standing right next to George Kliavkoff in Las Vegas when he said that in December, and I remember calling my editor at my old job and saying, "You're not gonna believe what he just said." And they're like, "Write the story right now," because it was so. And I remember the reader's reaction to it, where it was George Kliavkoff saying that Deion Sanders would be very important to the TV negotiation for the Pac-12. Well, unless Deion Sanders is planning to move to Oregon State between now and then, there may not be any Colorado in the Pac-12 TV negotiation.
Opens up quite a lot of different doors.
It does. And Colorado, to be fair, has been the one that we've said over the last couple of months, if somebody's going to move, they would be the ones that would move.
Right.
And then what happens next? Because we know that Brett Yormark, the Big 12 commissioner, has been in communication with Arizona. He's tried to get them to move. They've been fairly, resounding in their saying that they want to stay in the Pac-12. Utah has also said they want to stay in the Pac-12. But then you've got UConn, who they've been talking to. Gonzaga as potentially a basketball-only member. And so it does make you wonder what the next domino to fall would be, because I don't think if Colorado moves, they're moving alone.
They're definitely not going to move alone. And after you think about Deion for about 5 seconds, then your mind really just goes to Oregon, right?
What do you do if you're Oregon, right?
What do you do if you're Oregon? We're in Indianapolis today, and Tony Petitti said not really worried about expansion. Well, Oregon might want to go hang out in the Big 12 then.
So this is not something that's really been talked about, but you make a good point, Pete, because we're here at Big Ten Media Days.
Yep.
They keep making clear that they don't really want to take on anymore. I think when Kevin Warren was still the commissioner, there was maybe an appetite on his part to take on more. But once he left and went to the Chicago Bears, it doesn't seem like that appetite has continued. Interestingly enough, Michael Schill, the former president of Oregon, now the president of Northwestern, with much bigger problems on his plate.
Yeah.
And we saw a photo on Instagram from Brutus Buckeye with Puddles the duck.
With Puddles. And
everybody's like, what does it mean? I don't know that it means anything.
I don't think it means a single thing. It could be a future knock-on game in football.
But, okay, you said Oregon. And this is, I'm telling you now, we're into the zone of realignment talk where
it's kind of like the Twilight Zone.
Once the dominoes start to fall, until we get more solid information on anything, our minds can take us anywhere. So if you're Oregon, yes, do you examine your options like the Big 12? What about Washington? Would you consider that?
I think Oregon and Washington both are now in a position, right, where one of the two is probably going to need to go to the Big 12. So do you move the quickest so you're not that school left behind?
Okay, here's another thought, though. San Diego State was ready to move to the Pac-12. Probably still ready. At this point, maybe you have to go to San Diego State if you're the Pac-12, because remember, San Diego State had to pay the legal fees of the Mountain West.
That's true.
To stay there. To say, okay, we're going to lose Colorado. We'll take you to replace them.
Yeah.
And hope that satisfies Oregon and Washington. And let's be honest, if Colorado leaves and they are replaced with San Diego State, is that big of a difference in terms of whatever their TV deal would be?
Yeah. No, those are really good points. And then the other thought where I go is so then Arizona was also brought up as a companion to Colorado, and does President Bobby Robbins in Arizona take that opening before Washington and Oregon can? And
Bobby Robbins, interestingly enough, certainly wants to be a mover and a shaker.
He does.
In the world of college athletics. They held a big to-do in Washington, D.C., where they talked about the future of the sport, of sports, and how everything's going to work. So, yeah.
He wants to win a national title. Like, Arizona would really like to be more competitive, and they think that they're building in that direction.
Well, you add Arizona basketball to the Big 12, and it's already maybe the best basketball league in America.
And
then you add them.
There's no question mark, I think.
Right, because the UConn thing, yes, you would get their basketball. I don't know that Arizona or UConn football moves the needle as much, but either way, it's something that the Big 12 would
What
covet.
if you add Arizona and then add Gonzaga as basketball only? I mean, and now your mind kind of runs rampant on what the basketball TV contract could look like. And
yeah, I mean, it's not huge because the basketball numbers and football numbers are different. But and this is the part that I agree with Brett Yormark on, and I've had people push back on this. Basketball still matters. There's still real money in basketball. And you forget the big kind of leverage point between the Power 5 schools or the Power 2 or however you want to do it and the NCAA is the basketball tournament.
Yep.
If the Power 5 were to take their teams out of the NCAA basketball tournament, that's $1 billion a year property. $1 billion a year is still a lot of freaking money.
Yeah, that's a lot of money.
And so if you're the Big 12 and you want to be as strong as possible, well, what would put you in the proximity of the cool kids table? Having a basketball league that you cannot leave out of that tournament.
And now we're just calling it the Power 3 at that point.
Yeah.
No more Power 5.
I still think ACC fits in there pretty well.
Power 4. But, I mean, what we're talking about would decimate a conference that is just historically tied to college football that we've always thought of.
That is the part that is amazing to me because unless you can just stop the bleeding at Colorado, fill in San Diego State, and be done with it, it becomes a very big domino effect.
Well, and the bigger problem is, right, like San Diego State's not going to be able to fill in for Colorado in that they could take up like half of what Colorado, but it's
right. It probably isn't the same TV deal that you would have gotten. But
that you've been working on for months.
And remember, George Kliavkoff said, the longer we go, the better it gets, which it sounded so strange when he said it.
Yep.
And then, interestingly enough, they had a Q&A with George Kliavkoff and Mark Harlan, the AD at Utah.
The AD at Utah.
And Harlan answered questions and seemed very sure of the Utes' place in the Pac-12.
Do you know what Rick George did?
Rick George had to catch a flight. Rick George is the Colorado AD. They had a similar situation, and Rick George had to catch a flight before he could answer any questions. So it's going to be very interesting as we go to – what do we call going to press when we're putting a video on YouTube?
When we put the
upload
final
the video.
music
on,
right?
Right.
When
we put the finishing touches.
You put the final music touches on.
Exactly. When we put the finishing production notes on our video, as we know, Colorado still there.
Yep.
Pete Thamel from ESPN just walked by. We're just going to make him come tell us what's going to happen now.
Yeah.
But yes, right now, they're there.
Yep. Pete might have another story.
By tomorrow, who knows?
Yep.
We got a big show from Big Ten Media Days, though. A lot to talk about. James Franklin, Penn State head coach. Cade Stover and JT Tuimoloau from Ohio State. Mel Tucker, the head coach of Michigan State. Bruce Feldman from Fox Sports and The Athletic. Spencer Holbrook from Letterman Row. Loaded show, but of course, realignment trumps all. We'll be right back. We are here at Big Ten Media Days, and the stars are out. Bruce Feldman, Fox Sports and The Athletic, my former coworker.
I don't know about the stars out. They may be out, but they're definitely not in the seats.
They're on this show. You're going to hear from JT Tuimoloau and Cade Stover from Ohio State. You're going to hear from James Franklin, Mel Tucker. So we talked to a bunch of people here today. But, Bruce, the overarching stuff, Northwestern, and then Ohio State, and what happens next with them, and then Jim Harbaugh, who's not even here yet, but he is looming over the place.
That's a lot to get into. Obviously, the Northwestern story, I feel like for the last 10 days, has been the biggest story in college football. And the players aren't here, but I still think, that story keeps, I think it's beyond this.
Yes.
Whereas I feel like Ohio State is a really compelling thing right now. Having talked to, I talked to JT, I talked to Marvin Harrison Jr., and, the Michigan, it's so weird because you have the Michigan situation for them. They lost back-to-back games, got dominated, and yet they came within a field goal, probably winning the national title.
Yes. If they get a stop in the fourth quarter against Georgia, if there's a lot of ifs in that game, we're talking one play, they are the national champions, and we're having a really different conversation about Ohio State.
Yeah, and especially, there was no Marvin in the fourth quarter, right? He gets knocked out of the game,
yep.
and so, I think from talking to them, and I know you had similar conversations with them, that it's like, okay, we're right there.
Yeah.
But it's like, okay, but you're right there, but you also got dominated.
They're still pissed.
They should be.
Yeah.
But they also got dominated.
Yeah.
In their own place.
Well, and that's the thing. It was interesting hearing those people, whether it be Ryan Day, Gene Smith, the players. There's no excuse they can make because of the way it went down in both of those past two Michigan games. What do they have to do to get to the point where they can overcome Michigan? Because it feels like, as we saw, they can play on a national stage with national title contenders, but Michigan in a styles make fights situation feels like they're built to beat Ohio State.
They have to find a way to match Michigan's physicality. And, look, they're big and they should be able to do that. But for whatever reason, I feel like Michigan is built to beat Ohio State, and Ohio State is maybe built to try to, to beat Georgia.
Right.
And
on carpet in 72-degree dome, but they play the Michigan-Ohio State game in the cold in November.
Yeah, and I just think, with the receivers they have, they're really dynamic. But, a much better receiver than certainly Michigan is. But Michigan has a better offensive line.
Yep.
And I think that's the challenge for this team. And they lost, one first-round tackle and another one who went really high in the draft. So they're going to break in two new tackles. And I think that is going to be interesting to see because they definitely have talent.
Right.
We know they have talent on defense, but they got drilled in the second half by Michigan last year. And it happened without Blake Corum, who was their best player.
Right.
And it happened actually with Donovan Edwards was playing with a soft cast on his hand,
right.
And he wasn't 100%.
And I firmly believe that long touchdown by Donovan Edwards, even if he doesn't break that one, that the dam had broken on Ohio State's defense, where they'd stuffed Michigan over and over in the first half, but it felt like Michigan was getting rolling. It was going to be 4, 5, 6 yards of carry beyond that. So they were really just pounding on them at that point, and that's what Michigan does. And it's interesting because we're going to talk about Harbaugh. He's going to be here, but this is why this Harbaugh thing is so interesting. This is probably his best Michigan team. This is probably better than the team that beat Ohio State the past 2 years.
Yeah, the guys I've talked to who are inside that program say this will be his most talented team. Not only is it the most talented, so Blake Corum is back. A lot of the offensive linemen, Zach Zinter, the leaders of the team, they are back. The two leaders of the defense, Michael Barrett, Mikey Sainer still, they both are back.
Yeah.
I think those are, on paper, there's a lot to like for Michigan. Certainly it's J.J. McCarthy, year 2 as a starter, looked really good against Ohio State on that stage. Really was up and down and looked really shaky against TCU on that stage. So we'll see how he answers. But I think the other thing that now we're going to hear a lot about tomorrow is the expected 4-game suspension.
Yep.
Now look, those 4 opponents, no knock on Rutgers, but this is not a gauntlet here to get out of it.
Such East Carolina slander.
Sorry.
will not be tolerated. No. It's if you're going to suspend the guy for 4 games, this is when you do
Yeah,
it.
apologies to Mike Houston, but they're still going to be a pretty big underdog in that game.
Yeah.
And I think, he is such a this is Harbaugh, obviously not Mike Houston. He is such a polarizing topic that I'm fascinated to hear how he answers it.
Right.
Because, you never know what you're getting with him.
I feel like all of the coaches that were here today, obviously Kirk Ferentz, Ryan Day, but maybe Brett Bielema wouldn't be predictable, but almost everybody else, you could predict word for word what they're going to say. We don't know what Jim Harbaugh is going to say.
Well, we haven't talked about this since I saw you last, but obviously there's the Tennessee case,
Yep.
with Jeremy Pruitt, and now there's this case. So I'm curious for your thoughts, not to produce your show.
Produce away.
But this is a transition part. I felt like Tennessee was a transition. It was unique in that here's the whole school really throwing this, beleaguered loser coach under the bus for a lot of
and he took the brunt of it.
He took the brunt. And then people who were like also kind of cast-offs for them who have long show causes. This is different. This is Jim Harbaugh at Michigan at its best. But it's a much different case also, right? In terms of, but it's like the idea of...
It's more similar to the Tressel case.
It is.
There's some similarities to Bruce Pearl, but Bruce Pearl was acting and trying to reach out to people to say, hey, don't tell them that.
Can I ask you this, though?
Yeah.
And it's hard to predict what the NCAA and the Committee on Infractions think, but there's history, certainly Bruce Pearl.
Right.
I saw a lot of people commenting on Jim Tressel, and there was certainly some history there. I think in retrospect, it was like, wow, he lost his job for this, kind of thing.
Exactly.
And I don't know where the outrage meter is going to be on Jim Harbaugh.
The outrage is so different now because the world is different. We see these things differently. I always tell people, if you want to really understand how different things used to be, go back and read the Sports Illustrated game story on the 1993 Florida State national title. Those are the guys that got
This is the Charlie Ward era team.
Yeah, the Charlie Ward team. But the Foot Locker.
Free Shoes University.
Right, exactly.
Who was that guy
who
said
that? He wore a visor.
Yeah, I think you know him.
But you read this Sports Illustrated story, and it sounds like they committed murder. They got shoes. Like it used to be that the players were the bad guys, or anybody who dared violate an NCAA rule was the bad guys. We have come so far since then, and really so far since 2012 when all the Tressel stuff went down.
But 2011, but also not just with the Tressel. 2011 was Penn State and Sandusky.
I think that's where it turned. I think people said, that's terrible.
That's a scandal.
Yeah.
This other stuff of
stupid.
look, all the Miami stuff with
Nevin Shapiro was right before that too.
And that was like, oh my God, what happened? And it was like, oh, these guys are getting a lot of food, and they're getting a lot of Willie Williams-ish kind of treatment.
Right.
It's like, at the end of the day, I think people are like, okay, that sounds scandalous, because it's I think there's differences between breaking rules and breaking laws.
Very much so. Very much so. And I think if you asked people, the general populace, who the villain is in a lot of these cases now in 2023, they go, the NCAA. And they're coming from a completely different place now. But if I'm Michigan, I would like this wrapped up, because I would not like to deal with this case dragging through the season, which could be very special. If I could have them tell me this will be over, Jim Harbaugh's got to miss 4 games, Sharon Moore's got to miss 1 game, this guy's got to miss 1. If I could tell them this is it and it's over and we're not dealing with this anymore, if I'm Michigan, I would take that. If I'm Jim Harbaugh, who doesn't believe he did anything wrong, I might not.
And that's the fun part going to be tomorrow.
Yeah.
Like, how does he respond to this? Like, he is very unpredictable. It's interesting because this is a 4-game suspension we expect. If Northwestern, a month ago or whatever it was, 3 weeks ago, had just said, when this all came out and said, hey, we're going to suspend Pat Fitzgerald for the first month of the season, I'm curious if this is any different for them.
I don't know. I don't know that it would have changed anything with the plaintiffs' lawyers getting involved and all that. This was going to roll downhill on them, but I think it would have. I don't know that the president would have turned around and immediately fired Pat Fitzgerald, because they would have said we offered a fairly significant punishment.
Right.
But then they realized 2 weeks while he would have been on vacation anyway is not going to do it. And, poor David Braun at Big Ten Media Days today. He was at North Dakota State last year. Really wasn't around for any of this. He's answering questions about God knows what.
And at one point, I looked over, he had as many people as Ryan Day did.
Yeah.
Around him. So it's a really, again, Harbaugh is going to be the story tomorrow. But I think a big part of it is because nobody knows how he responds to this. There's a lot of coaches who are just going to give a statement and then they're not going to go back to it. And maybe he'll do that tomorrow. I imagine Tom Mars, his attorney, will probably prefer that way.
And I feel like, given, we've had some dealings with Tom Mars over the years, if Tom tells you to be quiet, that's probably a great idea. Because Tom doesn't usually
but we know
quiet.
we know sometimes people don't listen to their lawyers always because they get caught up in it.
You mean at Big Ten Media Days? And then they get suspended?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Might have happened to Urban Meyer that one time.
I believe I work with him now, so I shouldn't say
You
too
shouldn't
much
say
more.
anything,
Shouldn't say too
but
much.
I'll say it because it happened. We don't know what's going to happen to Jim Harbaugh tomorrow, but everyone is waiting. That will be probably the biggest podium event of talking season 2023. You'll see it. We'll break it down. But when we come back, we go to the other side of that rivalry. JT Tuimoloau and Cade Stover from the Ohio State Buckeyes talking about getting back to where they want to be. All right, we are here with two Ohio State Buckeyes, JT Tuimoloau, Cade Stover, tight end, edge rusher, but as we were talking about earlier, Cade would have been a Mike linebacker 20 years ago. JT, what would have been like playing next to that guy?
Kind of did play next to each other in the Utah game.
That's true.
Yeah, so, just to have his the toughness and the rowdiness he brings, man, you love it on the defensive side.
What is it like at practice? Because I know you guys probably have to bump into each other every once in a while. What is that like?
It's always fun. We always, before we go against each other, like, man, here we go. And then, boom, we go right to it. But it's always fun competing against Cade. We always bring the best out of each other. And then after hitting for an hour or so, we go back to being buddies often.
Are you more of a talker, he more of a talker?
It's hard. We both don't really talk. Yeah.
It's hard with a mouthpiece. People don't understand how hard it is to talk trash with a mouthpiece.
You wear one?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, give the mic to
You wear a
Cade.
mouthpiece? I don't wear a mouthpiece.
Really?
No.
I do wear a mouthpiece.
That would scare me. Yeah. So, Cade, I was wondering, you have a different background. You basically worked the family farm growing up. Your dad started this farm, right?
Yeah.
With like two cattle, and now you are a full operating farm.
Yep.
What jobs did you do growing up?
You wake up, you feed cows every morning, just like I was telling JT earlier, they're like raising little kids. So just it's like a bunch of little 10-year-olds that run around your house that you basically just try and keep in the pen and keep fed and healthy. So you're feeding them every morning. You're making hay. Depending on the time of year, every job's different. So you're making hay, you're cutting corn, you're all kind of stuff. There's always stuff to do.
And this is no days off. Don't get Christmas off. Don't get Thanksgiving off.
No days off. Cows eat on Christmas, your birthday, Thanksgiving. They eat every day.
And this is what, after football, this is what you want to do, right?
100%. This is the end all
What
goal.
you talk about, when you're feeding the cows, it's like a bunch of 10-year-olds. But is it relaxing for you to be out there just?
It's my like people say, like, you don't work a day in your life when you love what you do, right? And that it doesn't feel. I can't sit still when I'm at home because it's just I love being outside. I love working with animals. I love working with equipment. It's such a rewarding lifestyle.
What is your favorite piece of equipment to operate?
I love the combine, of course, like everybody does. That's my.
That seems awesome.
It is.
You're just up there real high and just mowing.
It's unbelievable. It's just unbelievable. Skill involved. It's really fun.
How long does it take to learn to operate something like that?
Just there's different jobs. Like if you're combining, it'll take a second because there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of stuff you got to watch. But other stuff like if you're working ground, like it's not hard. Like you can't mess that up really.
But you could hop up there and no problem
100%.
take down because you're using that to harvest, right?
Right. Yeah.
So, see, I done a little.
There you go. I like it. I like your research. Come
I'm
on.
not completely suburban. This one's suburban.
No,
You're-
come on.
Come on, dude.
Yeah, you do. Come on, JT. You know this.
I was gonna say that I asked JT, is there anything like that in Seattle? Probably out in Eastern Washington.
Yeah,
There's plenty of that, but not where
keep
you're
going
from.
out there.
Yeah.
You'll find Cade. What Cade does.
I'm not gonna be out there.
So, JT, you just did a free camp for kids in Columbus, and I found it interesting. You kind of fell in love with football going to a free camp that Russell Wilson put on?
Yeah.
Real early in his career with the Seahawks?
Yeah. So it was Russell, I think Doug Baldwin, Sidney Rice.
Oh, wow.
I forgot their tight end at the time. But, yeah, that was – and Richard Sherman was there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's a good bunch right there.
Yeah.
Nobody knew who any of those people were, I'm sure, at that time.
I think everybody knew who Russell was.
Yeah.
But I don't know if they knew everybody else they had.
So what was it like for you being on the other end of that, where it's the 12-year-olds and the 11-year-olds looking up to you as, oh, my God, that's JT?
It was a great experience just to see the smile on these kids' faces, and just, as simple as it was doing drills, but to know that it was my camp, and I got a chance to give back and spend time with the kids that look up to Ohio State, and just be able to step out of my Ohio State player nature and just become and be a what should we call it? Being a light to those who are either going to continue their football career or just don't know but want to ask questions. Just being there for them was just amazing for me.
That's very cool. While you have the mic, I have to ask you about one of the greatest games I've ever seen anybody play, the Penn State game last year. As you are doing that, you are forcing fumbles, you are intercepting passes, you are sacking the quarterback. Do you have a tally in your head of what you've actually done, or is it just sort of black out and see the stat sheet like, holy cow?
Yeah, I didn't realize how much I did until after the game when the boys on the bus started pulling up the stat line, and then Coach Day announced the stat line. But, yeah, during the game it was just do whatever you can to help your brothers get a win.
Cade, in a situation like that, how much of that do you even get to see, or are you meeting with the guys on the offense? Do you know what kind of game he's having at that point?
No, you definitely had a feeling, especially after he picked it off and scored.
Oh yeah,
that's when you're like, damn, he really just do that? It was really good. And I mean, you're still with you meet for most of it, but I'm still watching. I'm watching every play.
How often in practice does he have those damn did he really just do that
moments? A lot of time. That's a very athletic person that can do whatever he wants, really.
So I got to ask about the way last season ended, because I'm sure it still kind of burns, but did it help knowing how close you were to being in a national championship game, to potentially winning a national championship?
Somewhat. Not really, because then again, it really doesn't matter. Yeah, it was great, and yeah, I mean, I'm so proud of everybody the way they handled things, but it meant nothing. You don't get nothing for second place. You can tell your kids you've been there, but that's about it.
So, when you go to Ohio State, how quickly do they let you know what the standard is?
Right away. I mean, they don't even have. It's right. It's not really even it's not really told to you.
Yeah.
You just know. You watch by the way people work. You watch by the way people act, and you're like, it's just a different feeling.
Is that why the program has sustained itself? I mean, there's never been a time when Ohio State was bad.
I think so. I just think it's it's supported so well. It is publicized so well, and we buy into every single bit of love and the character of people that we bring in. Like, we're bringing the best type of people. We're with the best type of people, and it's easy to keep something good going when you're bringing good people.
So do you guys have to, because that standard is sort of ingrained in you, do you have to use how last season ended as motivation, or is it just intrinsic that you're going to work your way back to get there again?
I mean, there's no doubt about it, I'm using every bit of that. It's not a day I don't wake up and think about that. Like I said earlier today, I wear it honestly, what happened. So it's something that you basically take as a man on the chest. And I don't know about you, but
yeah, I think Cade hit it well. Obviously uses motivation. I feel like if it's not, then something's wrong. But we have a standard, and not being able to do do what we're supposed to do the past 2 years, it's obviously fuel, and it's a different type of mindset going into this offseason, and it's been one different offseason, but in a great way. So it's obviously used as motivation.
All right, well, good luck, gentlemen. Camp about to start. The hard part is over. The boring lifting part, you actually get to hit people now. So congratulations and good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you. We are here with Penn State head coach James Franklin, and we got to talk about the night you guys had in Indianapolis last night. The owner of St. Elmo, the famous steakhouse, is a Penn State grad.
Yep.
You took the players there. Now, Olu told me he is not a shrimp guy. Did anybody try the shrimp cocktail?
Yeah, so Adisa did.
Okay.
Olu did not.
Okay.
And I tried to coach up Adisa as much as I can. You got to
This is
open
Adisa
your
Isaac,
mouth.
yes.
You got to open your mouth. And I'm watching him. He's trying to be polite. His mouth is shut. He's chewing. And then all of a sudden, those vapors or whatever you want to call them out the nose, and his eyes started tearing up. So we've all seen that, right?
The first time I came to Indianapolis ever, I was sick as a dog, could not breathe. The only time on the whole trip I could breathe, eating that shrimp cocktail.
It'll do it. Yeah,
was
there's no
amazing.
doubt. It's like Vicks.
It's perfect. Yeah, Olu said he went with the tomahawk ribeye, so I can see how he got. He's 323 pounds. How is that even possible for a guy that lean?
Yeah, he looks great. I mean, if you'd have watched him crush this tomahawk, I mean, it was impressive. But yeah, he's doing really well. He's really improved his testing numbers, which was something that was going to be a really real emphasis for us. Obviously, his on-the-field play kind of goes without saying, but his testing numbers in terms of 40 and vertical jump and pro agility and all those types of things, he's really made a good move on, and his weight has increased.
He was one of the first guys who was kind of a Willie stay, Willie go last season, who came back and said, "I'm staying." How was that process internally? When did he tell you, "Hey, I'm definitely back"?
Yeah, it was somewhat strange. I meet with all these guys that are on the bubble and their parents. We kind of set up a meeting. We kind of do a draft analysis. We kind of have a bunch of reports from GMs. My guy, Andy Frank, who runs our recruiting department, puts it all together. And we sat down, and I told Olu and his family, I said, "Hey, you should leave."
Yeah.
All the data is saying that.
Because he could have been the first tackle off the board.
Yeah, obviously it was up for discussion, but he was in that discussion. And I said, "You should leave," And him and his family said, "Coach, we really appreciate your perspective, but we always planned on being 4 years, and getting my degree before I left campus was really important." He's got like a 3.67 GPA
In supply chain
management. One of the best programs in the country. And, it was really important for him to finish that and come back. The other thing that people don't realize is when we were having that conversation, Olu's freakishly young.
Yeah.
So as that conversation was going on, he was 19 years old.
Oh, my God.
So that factored into it, too.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I was here in this building a few months ago watching Anthony Richardson throw, and I remember they couldn't get him into a bar afterward because he was still 20. So Olu, a year younger than that.
Correct.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, I can't even imagine trying to think about the NFL at 19
That's
years
right.
old. So he also has a lot to work against at practice. And you mentioned Abdul Carter when you were up on the big stage, and that's a guy who it feels like we realized very quickly this guy is good. How soon did you see it when he got on campus, what he could be?
Well, I think right away he tested extremely well. He was like 233 pounds, and he ran well, and he jumped well. So right away we're like, this guy's special. We had him in camp, so we kind of knew that. When you talk about iron sharpens iron, Chop Robinson as well. And I think that also played a factor in Olu, right? He's knowing he's going to have these guys to go against every single day at practice. That's going to help him. But Abdul, once we started to get into practice and you could just see his acceleration to the ball, that was the thing that was different.
Size, speed looks similar to Micah. How is his game similar, different from Micah?
Yeah, Micah was a guy that I think legitimately could have played tailback at Penn State.
Wow.
Just a phenomenal athlete. If you haven't gone back and watched his high school highlight of playing running back, it's pretty impressive.
Abdul, I'm not sure yet. It's too early to say, but he may be more explosive linear.
Wow.
Than Micah, and that's hard to say because Micah, as we all know, is a total freakazoid. But he's in that conversation. He really is.
So Drew comes in and had a chance to play a little bit last year. I imagine that's how you wanted it. You didn't want to have to throw him in. Do you feel like he's in a good spot right now?
Yeah, I think when you look at whether it's the NFL or you look at college, I know everybody in the NFL is now playing the rookies. I do still think, like when I was with the Green Bay Packers, we had Brett, we drafted Aaron. I was there for Aaron's rookie year. I still think there's a ton of value in that to come in as a freshman or as a rookie and sit behind a veteran, learn from what they do well, what you may do differently. And he played in 10 games, so that experience is going to be really valuable for him to build on. And we got a really good competition there with Bo Prabula as well.
All right, James, I got my rookie producer, River. He's going to have his first St. Elmo shrimp cocktail while we're here, so just give him, before you go, how do you do it?
I think the biggest tip is don't have manners and chew with your mouth open, because if your mouth is shut, I don't know what you call them, vapors or whatever.
It feels like it's going to explode out your nostrils.
Correct.
Yeah.
And if, like he said, if you got a cold, it's the best thing ever. But if not, I would just don't have manners when you eat it.
James Franklin, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. I had a mutual friend, Trevor Moad. He helped you create the mental architecture for your football program. I helped him write a couple of books.
That's right.
So I got to ask you, in the words of our friend Trevor, how hard was it to stay neutral last year?
It was tough. He had to really practice what we preached at that point, but we were able to do that, and that's how we were able to get through and come out of it, actually better off. We learn from it, and it's just you go to the facts and you say you try to say it's not good or bad, right or wrong. It just is what it is, and what have I learned, and what's the next step I need to take, and that's what we've done.
You had such success in 2021 where you got some guys out of the transfer portal, most notably Kenneth Walker. Mm-hmm. You revamped again through the portal. Mm-hmm. How much of this team now is guys that you've been recruiting all along, and then how much is guys you've picked out of the portal?
Yeah, there's a lot of guys on our team that we recruited out of the high school ranks. Also, we have the majority of the guys that we get in the portal are not one and done players. And Ken Walker left early. He wasn't really a one and done guy initially, and so even some of the guys like a Malik Carr, our starting tight end. He came to us after one season at Purdue, and so this is going on like his third year with us. And so even some of the portal guys that we recruited, have been with us for a few years, and they understand our culture. They're all bought in, and so with those guys and then the high school guys that we've recruited, some of these guys we recruited since they were sophomores that we have now. I feel like we've got a solid foundation, and everyone is bought in and understands our culture.
That's what I was going to ask is how hard has it been to establish a culture when you got hired February of 2020. Coach Antonio stepped down, I think, right after signing day. So you basically get hired 3 weeks before the world stops. And then you've got all that, and then you had success out of the portal, so that and the college football landscape is changing at this time. How hard was it to just have a group of players that you could have for a while and say, this is what we do, this is how we do it? Yeah,
it's tough, coming in now to build a team, but it's something that we feel confident that we're able to do. We have a process, and we trust the process. When we acquire players, whether it's through the high school ranks or through the portal, we ask ourselves, is the kid tough? Is he disciplined? Is he selfless? And if he checks those boxes, then we go after him. We try to sign him, and so it makes it easier to establish the culture and get the kids to buy in, because they know coming in the door, if you come to Michigan State, this is what it's going to be about. And so they want that. They can talk to players on the team, and hey, what is it like? What is Coach Tuck like? What are these coaches like? What is it like in the weight room? How do they treat you here? What are the standards? And then if there's something that they want, then they sign up with us, and then we get them in and we indoctrinate them. And the older players, show them the ropes. and then we're able to get them bought into the culture.
How tough is it when you have a guy who's produced for you like Keon Coleman, who comes to you and says, "Coach, I'm putting my name in the portal"?
Yeah, I mean, I wish them all the best. All of these guys, every single one of them. They have aspirations to do big things, to go to the NFL, and they want to try to get there any way that they can. And if a kid feels like the best thing for him to do is to go somewhere else, then I'm going to support him 100%. Just like we got guys that come to us, like Ken Walker. No one knew who Ken Walker was until he came to us. It was a good move for him, and it worked out. And they don't always work out like that, and it's an inexact science. But nothing surprises me in college football, and with my 10 years in the NFL, I'm used to guys coming and going.
Yeah.
And some guys, sometimes even in the NFL, some guys leave that you don't necessarily want to leave. Sometimes you get guys you don't necessarily want to get.
I was going to say,
that's
in the
kind of
NFL,
part
the
of it.
GM may say, "Hey, listen, we need somebody in another position this week, so this guy's not going to be here. We may re-sign him in 2 weeks."
Yeah, I mean, and you have to really stay neutral because, you gotta play with the cards that you're dealt with, that are dealt to you, and that's what we do. That's what we do.
So, your quarterback Noah, how much did he develop? And it seemed like into spring that he was looking toward being the guy, and then obviously Peyton transfers.
Yeah. Well, we had open competition in the spring, and he really started to come alive. Last season, he was doing a really good job in camp, and then when he got in the games, he did a nice job. I mean, and so in this past spring, he picked up where he left off, along with Caden Hauser. All three of those guys are competing for the job, and he's just gotten better and better and better. He's been with us for a while. He knows the offense. He knows what we expect out of that position, and he embraces the competition, which is critically important.
So what needs to happen defensively? I know you've talked about the health. Obviously, that was an issue last year.
Yeah.
Can depth help that?
It's critical. I mean, we starting up front, and we need to have a strong rotation in our front on our defensive line. We went out and got 3 6'5", 300+ defensive tackles that can help in our rotation to go along with Derek Harmon, Simeon Barrow, and Maverick Hansen, and those guys. We got 6 or 7 guys that we can roll there. We signed 4 defensive ends. One of those guys is from Texas A&M, Tamisha Adelaide, that was 280 coming in the door, a big end that is really a mismatch on the edge in the run game. And
he got stuck behind some 5-stars at Texas A&M.
I mean, and he was one of the top players in the country coming out himself. And so, then we got our linebackers back. Kyle Holliday is back. Brule decided to come back. Jacoby Winmond decided he was going to come back. And so that's gonna help our defense. That's going to help our secondary. We added Terry Roberts, who's played in the Big Ten, Samar Melvin, who's played in the Big Ten, Amarion Smith, who's played a lot of football at Cincinnati, played at a high level, along with the young guys. We signed 6 or 7 defensive backs the year before. They were freshmen last year, and a lot of those guys they had to play because of injuries, and they got the training. So, we have a lot of guys who have played some football and with a mix of older guys and younger guys that I think is going to allow us to get the job done this year.
You came in wanting to be competitive with everybody in this league in terms of recruiting and getting those guys on your campus.
Yep.
You have gotten some of those guys on your campus. You haven't been able to land them all. How do you sell at this point and get those guys on campus, and then instead of they come on campus and then they end up signing elsewhere, how do they sign with you?
Yeah, well, we're starting to get them. We're getting we signed 9 4-stars last in the last class, and some top guys in the portal. We're strong in the NIL space. The more that players come to Michigan State, the more they take a look, the more they really dig in, and they really get to know our coaches and the existing players. they can really see it. They can really feel the connection. They can feel the vision. And we're opening a new facility. We have a $67 million facility of expansion and renovation that was much needed, which will put us in the top 3 or 4 in the Big Ten, which is huge. We were at a severe recruiting disadvantage, and we're not recruiting off of renderings anymore. We're moving into the new locker room on Wednesday.
That's hard when you have to show the drawing, right?
Yeah, it's hard. We got to show the drawing, and we're moving into the new locker room next week, and so we're able to take the recruits through, put a hard hat on them, and walk them through, and they can actually see it. When you get here, this will be the facility that you'll be in. We'll be able to compete at the highest level with anybody.
Are they
we
going
play.
to have those chairs that turn into beds?
Oh,
the lockers. Those are crazy.
I don't want to let the cat out of the bag. We haven't done anything that's crazy and not functional. But I can tell you this: we don't have to take a backseat to anyone when it comes to our locker room.
We had a wooden stool. When I was talking to one of my old teammates the other day, and he's like, "I took the stool home with me. I've kept the stool." Yeah. But yeah, now you can just live there. I don't know why any of these players ever leave.
Yeah, I tell you what, and that's why we're really looking forward to getting into our locker room because, with the construction, our team has been displaced. Our locker room, that they use every day, we moved it to the stadium, so it was a game day locker room. And they had to take a bus to back and forth, and
not practical in practice. And
and they didn't hang out there like they normally did. Those guys would stay there an hour or 2 hours after practice hanging out.
Right.
And so now that they're getting their locker room back, that's really going to help with our team chemistry because that's their home.
Yeah.
And that's where they hang out.
Yeah, you don't want it to be a bunch of guys who just come, clock in, and go their separate ways.
That's
you want them to be together a lot.
Yeah, and that's it's the beauty of the locker room, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's where all your guys are, and that's where they hang out, and that's where they connect, and then we're gonna have a new players lounge and all that. That's all a part of it, and so we're moving in the right direction. We're getting a lot of top-level players that are coming and interested in Michigan State. We're starting to get those commitments from those guys, and it's only going to get better.
So you were head coach of Colorado before you came to Michigan State. Did Deion Sanders call you and ask for any advice when he
No. Deion, Prime doesn't need any advice from me. But I got to know Prime a little bit when I recruited Lewis Seen out of his high school in Texas.
Yeah.
And Lewis Seen is a great player.
At Georgia, absolutely.
Yeah, I signed him at Georgia. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for Prime. He's got his own process. He knows what he wants to do. He knows what type of players that he needs to get the job done. He's got a lot of connections coast to coast. He can get players. He sells himself. But he's an excellent football coach. It's not just all sizzle. I mean, there's a lot of substance there.
So you mentioned he knows what he wants. You know what you want
Yep.
player. I mean, I look at what Kirby's doing at Georgia.
Yep.
And you work with him.
Yep.
You work with Nick Saban. You work with Jim Tressel
Yep.
and that group at Ohio State, where they kind of knew exactly body type wise, position wise. How hard is it to find some of those guys? Like the D lineman you just mentioned, the guy you got from Texas A&M. How many of those people are just walking around?
It's really hard to find big defensive linemen, and everyone wants them. So it's really tough. And if they're not in your state, you got to go out of the state to get them. Then that makes it even tougher. And so that's one of the challenges that we have. And so we recruit, coast to coast. We've got kids on our team from California, Arizona, Colorado, Oregon. We got guys from Florida, Georgia, New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts. I mean, everywhere. We're going everywhere. North Carolina, Virginia, wherever we got to go to get guys, we're going to get them because we know what type of players we need, and you don't want to make exceptions because if you make exceptions, you'll have a team full of exceptions. We got to get the guys that have the size, the power, the speed, those things that you need to be able to compete against the best teams.
You got a bunch of them here, so
that's right.
Good luck. Appreciate
thank you so much. Go Green.
We are here at Big Ten Media Days. Got Letterman Row here. Spencer Holbrook, how we doing?
Doing well. A lot of Ohio State coverage coming at LettermanRow.com, so it's going to be a good day here.
We got Ohio State. We got Illinois. We got Penn State. Rutgers. Also Northwestern. That seems to be the topic du jour, although it's interesting because there's not really a lot of people to ask questions of with Northwestern. David Braun, their interim coach, was the only person who came, and this guy, I mean, they didn't bring the players, and I understand that completely, because what the heck are they supposed to say?
Nothing.
But and David Braun, their interim coach, this guy was at North Dakota State last year. He's brand new. His wife's about to have a baby, and all he's getting is pelted with questions about naked pull-ups and dry humping in years where he was way, way, way away from Evanston.
Yeah, it's one of the most bizarre things I've ever seen at Big Ten Media Days. And, a couple years ago, Kevin Warren not answering questions about COVID was one thing.
Yes.
But then it's a completely different weird thing to just see this guy who doesn't really have anything to do with this.
Yeah.
Go up there and have to be the almost like sacrificial lamb for the program, while the athletic department, the athletic director, the president still hasn't spoken, and he ended up speaking.
Derek Gregg has finally talked. Michael Schill talked to the Daily Northwestern. Michael Schill's the president. Derek Gregg's the AD. He talked to Adam Rittenberg from ESPN on Wednesday. He said, "Hey, there's no place for hazing at Northwestern."
Of course, there's not.
Well, the weirdness of it is that the guy who was the AD for most of the time at Northwestern is the ACC commissioner, Jim Phillips, and he got up at ACC Media Days on Tuesday, said his kind of canned, I can't talk about this because it's the subject of litigation, although he didn't say I didn't do anything wrong,
Yes.
or he just said he felt bad, he was sorry if anyone was hurt, and it was like, whoa. So, yeah, David Braun's up here, who, of all the people who could have been here, the least equipped to answer any questions about all this, which is probably why he's the one here.
Yes.
But I just felt genuinely bad for the guy.
There was no winning with this
Yeah.
Northwestern situation, because I don't know if there would be league punishment for not showing up.
Yeah.
We've never had this happen before,
Right.
so it's just unprecedented. So, like, does the league punish them for not showing up? Maybe. So that's why you have to have somebody here.
Yeah.
It probably should have been the athletic director, but if it's not, it certainly shouldn't be the former North Dakota State assistant turned Northwestern head coach overnight, who has not much to do with this. It's just one of the most bizarre things.
And here's the thing. Unless he pulls off a miracle this season, which would be winning multiple games, I think, 3 games, he's not going to work at Northwestern next year.
No.
Like, he's going to move on with his coaching career and go somewhere else and try to forget this ever happened. And it's just a strange situation. It gets weirder tomorrow because Jim Harbaugh is going to be here with potentially a 4-game suspension looming. We don't yet know if that's going to be finalized. And, of all the coaches, because we go today, Ryan Day's here, Kirk Ferentz is here. Like, if something like this was going on, and I'm not casting aspersions at them or anything, because this is not going on with them, but what they'd say.
Yes.
We could predict word for word what they'd say. Jim Harbaugh is the one guy you can't predict what he'll do.
Yeah, and this is my 4th media day, 5th year covering the team, 4th media day, and Jim Harbaugh seems to get weirder with his media sessions every time he's here.
Yeah.
And so, like, first of all, what does he say in general? You don't know what he's ever going to say. Second of all, now that he's going to be peppered with questions about lying about cheeseburgers, it's going to be even more bizarre. And
Say it again. Say it louder for the people in the back. What we are really talking about here.
Lying about cheeseburgers.
Wait, one more time.
Lying about cheeseburgers. Andy, my hotel room here in Indy, I can see the NCAA headquarters from the window, and you're almost looking down at the NCAA, and I think everyone here is looking down on the NCAA because, a lot of people have called it a clown show, a joke, whatever you want to call it.
Your readers who went through a very different experience with with the same bylaw with Jim Tressel, I'm sure are like, what? Our guy got fired over this. What the hell?
Yeah. If you want to really put it into that terms, more than a decade later, Jim Harbaugh got a slap on the wrist.
Oh, yeah.
Because legally, according to the NCAA, lying to investigators is the worst thing you can possibly do.
Bruce Pearl's was sort of similar, but not really, because they also caught Bruce Pearl telling people, hey, it's an Ohio State story too, by the way. It's Aaron Kraft.
Yes, exactly.
They caught him, asking people to say, hey, Aaron Kraft wasn't at. They called it a barbecue. It was really a cookout. Let's be real here, people. But yeah, it's so strange. So Harbaugh, at this point, we don't know that he's okay with the 4-game suspension. We think the NCAA is cool with it. The Michigan administration seems cool with it because they want to get this out of the way with a potentially special Michigan season on deck.
Yeah.
But Jim Harbaugh doesn't – and I understand this. If you don't think you did anything wrong, you don't want to admit you did something wrong if you don't believe you did anything wrong.
Yeah, but if you did, I think all of these coaches now know lying to investigators, again, probably the worst thing you can do.
Yeah, now he said, I don't recall. And this is semantics. This is semantics because he was shown a receipt. And it's, now do you recall? I don't recall. So we'll see what happens. But it's fascinating to me because it was dropped right before Big Ten Media Days. I'm pretty sure that was on purpose.
Yes.
Meanwhile, we're sitting a few feet from Ryan Day. We're going to hear from Cade Stover and JT Tuimoloau later in the show. The Buckeyes going on about their business. They came, I think they were one defensive stop in the Peach Bowl away from winning the national title last year, but they're also 0 for their last 2 against Michigan. And those are a weird couple things to reconcile, Spencer.
I asked JT Tuimoloau, maybe one of the weirder questions he got, of, is it weird how much motivation you guys have in an offseason after a loss? Because the Georgia game put the program almost back on the map. A lot of people were starting to think, okay, what's wrong with Ohio State? Is Ohio State broken after the Michigan loss because Ohio State legitimately looked like its spirit had been broken in that second half? You go play Georgia, and you were better than that team for probably 59 minutes.
Probably till Marvin Harrison got hurt.
Yeah, I mean, for a very long stretch of that game, I should probably say 59 minutes. You've got a lot of listeners down south. But.
Well, yeah, but okay. But let's be real. The Georgia people will admit their defense got sliced and diced in that game, and nobody did that to them.
And I think, to be honest, I think they're not even like a defensive stop. I think they're a Lathan Ransom falling down on accident.
Yeah.
That 76-yard touchdown, he just fell down.
Yeah.
And you don't always see very skilled athletic defensive backs falling down.
Right. And those were the types of plays that killed Ohio State last year.
Absolutely.
So, but it is interesting to hear them because they are – and look, everybody's motivated. Everybody who plays for a program like Ohio State, like Georgia, like Michigan, where you're expected to win championships, is highly motivated. But it felt different. Like, you'll hear it in Cade Stover's voice when you hear him interviewed.
Yeah, he's an Ohio kid, and he's a kid from Mansfield, Ohio, which an hour maybe from Columbus. He grew up scarlet and gray, watching James Laurinaitis do his thing. You know, this is a guy who used to play defense because of how violent he is.
Oh, yeah.
And he might get violent if you ask him about Michigan. That's the bottom line. Like, he does not like talking about it, but you kind of have to talk about it, and you know it goes all the way to the top. And that's, I have a story at LettermanRow.com. This motivation to beat Michigan goes completely to the top levels of the athletic department. I asked Gene Smith, just plain and simple, like, does the last 2 years motivate you? And he said, absolutely, it does, 100%. And the only way to flip the script is to win the game.
Yeah.
You've got to now wait, I think, 200 some more days or 100 some more days to do it. You have to flip that script, or else you're going to come back here, next year at this exact time, and Michigan's going to be picked to win the Big Ten again.
Yeah.
And it just adds another layer to this chapter of, what happened in the rivalry, how did it flip? But it also adds another chapter of, this is a very ticked off Ohio State team that that kind of sees it now, like, oh, Michigan's picked to beat us now.
Well, and picking Michigan to beat them does not feel like it's just a styles make fights.
Yeah.
They happen to. Picking Michigan to win the Big Ten this year feels like, hey, this is the most talented Michigan team Jim Harbaugh's had. There are NFL dudes all over the field.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes this so interesting is Ohio State really is in that position. And I was at SEC Media Days last week, and it was interesting to see Alabama in that position because it's not where they've been. But realistically, they are behind Georgia in the SEC and in the national title race. That's reality.
Yeah.
Georgia has better, at least more accomplished players right now. Alabama may ultimately have better NFL guys, just as Ohio State may ultimately have more and better NFL guys than Michigan. But right now, Ohio State is behind them.
Yeah, and however you want to split it, because you can look at recruiting rankings or coaching staffs, and I think Ohio State has a really talented staff that they've put together. Yep. You can say Ohio State is ahead of Michigan in a lot of things, but there's a scoreboard for a reason, and the last 2 years, the scoreboard has said what it has said, and the results have shown that this program is currently behind Michigan. And so this week, it's so weird, Andy, because, again, fourth time coming over here, the headliner of this entire week has been Ohio State. And
yes.
if they beat Michigan, maybe next year it'll be Ohio State. It certainly isn't Ohio State right now because not only the Northwestern thing today, but they didn't even get put on the second day. The headliner is always the second day of this thing. Ohio State's on the first day, where Michigan normally is.
Yep.
And Michigan goes tomorrow as the spotlight program of tomorrow. It feels weird, but in a way, it feels right because of the pedigree of Michigan right now. That program is on something right now.
The politics of media day scheduling always fascinate me.
Yeah.
But there's another program here today. We're going to hear from James Franklin later. Penn State is in an interesting position right now because it feels like they have more elite talent than they've had in a long time. The OluFashanu, who's here today, could be the first offensive lineman off the board in the NFL draft next year. JT, he and JT are probably going to be fairly close together in the NFL draft, and will probably be matched up against one another quite a bit in that game.
I would hope so. That'll be fun.
Oh, it'll be awesome. But, Abdul Carter is a guy who's got at least 2 more years at Penn State. He looked like a young Micah Parsons last year.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, it feels like there's this wild card here. And remember, Penn State always plays Ohio State tough, but for whatever reason, they can't win in Ann Arbor. But they can play Michigan just fine in State College, and Michigan goes to State College this year.
Yeah, it seems like the perfect storm for Penn State to have a historic season for that program.
Yeah.
But, sorry for the caveat,
No.
Michigan is really good.
Exactly.
And Ohio State is really good. And so maybe Penn State is more talented than Penn State's ever been. But right now, if I had to vote, I still wouldn't put Penn State ahead of either of them. And that's probably...
Right, and nobody's doing that. But that's why I wonder, are we sleeping on them maybe a little bit too much?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because a lot of people have questions about Ohio State at quarterback just because Kyle McCord hasn't been named the starter yet.
Right.
I think that will come. But they remind me of a lot of each other in ways because Penn State has that really talented duo at running back. Ohio State has a really talented running back core coming back.
Absolutely.
Penn State has an unknown at quarterback and a couple of spots on the offensive line that you wonder about. Ohio State has a really strong core. They're in the middle of that offensive line, but a quarterback that you don't know about. They remind me in a lot of ways of each other. I just think the deciding factor is number 18 for Ohio State, and Penn State's going to have to deal with that. And this could be the best, again, Penn State team that they've had, and it still might not matter.
Right.
And that's a hard pill to swallow.
And Marvin Harrison Jr., as someone who has watched him play an awful lot, he is spectacular. We saw Devontae Smith be the best player in college football as a wide receiver. I think Marvin can do that too.
Yeah, I think they're so hard to compare because of the way
Very
they play.
different guys, yeah.
Just so different. But, I remember, the first couple glimpses of Marvin making those catches in practice. And you say, well, can he do that in a game, though? And then he goes out and just does it in a game and gets up and does the bow and arrow thing. And you just that's normal now. And when the extraordinary becomes ordinary, that's when you know you're seeing something special. He's just so different. I'm really glad the spotlight's on him today because he really does deserve it. The way that he plays the game, the things that he does on the field, they're not human. A lot of people around our beat, just colleagues, we call him a Martian. Well, he's not from Earth.
Yeah.
All of the earthly players are pretty good. Then there's Marvin.
And then, of course, you've got Caleb Williams out west. Theoretically, he could win a second Heisman, but there's a reason nobody's won 2 in a row since Archie Griffin, and Archie's the only one who's ever done it. It's hard to do.
Yeah.
Caleb's going to get picked apart. That's why I do think Marvin has a really good chance of being that guy. And I do think, Devontae Smith kind of helped pave the way for it because before we would give all the credit to the quarterback. And I think in that 2020 year, Heisman voters kind of realized, no, the receiver can be the special sauce here.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good recipe for Marvin to be able to get over that hump and do what Devontae did. I think the biggest problem is in the Alabama season, there were a couple of injuries where Devontae got so many targets.
Yeah.
And you talk about Emeka Egbuka, who I don't know if people realize this, maybe they don't, had only 125 fewer receiving yards than Marvin Harrison Jr. did last year.
That's amazing.
Marvin Harrison Jr. had, I think, 1263. I could be wrong. I'm pretty sure Emeka had 1150. Wow. Which is just, they're very close to each other.
Yeah.
And you don't realize it because of the way Marvin Harrison goes and does it. But Emeka Egbuka from the slot, man, he's just so good. And so that's my worry with Marvin Harrison Jr. is
that it just kind of gets siphoned off.
It's almost a little too fair in the offense. Julian Fleming's going to have, some catches, probably 500 yards or so. Carnell Tate may have some catches. Cade Stover, who, we hear from a little bit, he's going to have his 30 to 40 catches, maybe 500-600 yards receiving like he did last year. And so is there almost too much for Marvin to overcome as far as in his own offense to get over that hump?
Well, that would be a good problem for Ohio State to have. I think if that's the problem, they'll take it because it means they're beating the hell out of everybody. But, again, like you said, it comes down to that final game of the regular season. Those guys in maize and blue with the winged helmets, and we'll just have to see. They're the ones in the featured spot, and, of course, couldn't be the featured spot at Big Ten Media Days without some drama. So we'll see what happens with Jim Harbaugh tomorrow.
It's going to be really fun. I'm really excited to hear from Jim Harbaugh, and it's the only place in America where 11-0 means nothing, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Both of these programs, 11-0 meant nothing last year on November 26th, and then Ohio State, everything was terrible after that, and for Michigan, 12-0 was awesome.
Welcome to the Big Ten, baby. For tonight's Extra Point, we go back to where we started, more potential realignment. This is one of those times in college sports where your imagination runs wild, and it probably will run wild for a little while until we find out exactly who is moving where. When stuff like this happens, I think of the night of the first Big 12 missile crisis. If you remember the name Dan Beebe, he was the butt of a lot of jokes because he was the Big 12 commissioner back in 2010 when Larry Scott and the then Pac-10 tried to take half of the Big 12. How did the Big 12 stay together? Well, one, Texas really, really wanted to start its own network. But two, Dan Beebe managed to create a deal that allowed the Big 12 to make as much money with 10 members, because Nebraska and Colorado were leaving, as they had with 12. How did he do this? Well, have you seen those sitcom episodes where a guy has two dates and they're in different restaurants and he runs between the restaurants, between courses, and hilarity ensues? That's what happened. It was a Kansas City hotel room. Fox people are on one floor. ESPN people are on another floor. Dan Beebe is running back and forth trying to lock down this deal. He gets it locked down. Texas goes to Larry Scott and says, oh, by the way, we'd like to do our own network. The Pac-16 deal falls apart. The Big 12 is saved. And now here we are, 13 years later, and it's all coming full circle potentially. Colorado could be coming back to the Big 12. And it's a Big 12 that only existed because Dan Beebe acted like a sitcom character running between hotel floors. So the next time you want to chuckle at former Big 12 Commissioner Dan Beebe, remember, he's the one that kept the conference alive so it could do this.